two sections in here, one of which we read today, and the other one which is later on in the Parsha. So the first one is on page 1041. If you don't have the Eitz Chaim, it's verse 11 in chapter 8. And it would, in the, if we were doing a full Torah reading, it would be Sheni. So let me just share with you what it says. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God and fail to keep God's commandments, God's rules and God's laws, which I enjoin upon you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and your flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware lest your heart grow haughty and you forget the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness with its seraph serpents and scorpions, a parched land with no water in it, who brought forth water for you from the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers had never known, in order to test you by hardships, only to benefit you in the end. And you say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. Remember that it is the Lord your God who gives you the power to get wealth, in fulfillment of the covenant that he made on oath with your forefathers, as is still the case. If you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve them or bow down to them, I warn you this day that you shall certainly perish. Like the nations that the Lord will cause to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you did not heed the Lord your God. That's the first part. And the second part is, it can be found later in the Parsha, which would, if we were doing a full Torah reading, would be Hamishi, and it starts with verse 12 on 1048 in chapter 10. So, basically saying that God has, that God's going to cause us to prosper in all our endeavors. Okay, but don't forget, we're still part of this covenant thing. And now, O Israel, what does the Lord God demand of you? Only this, to revere the Lord your God, to walk only in God's paths, to love God, and to serve the Lord God with all your heart and with all your soul, keeping the Lord's commandments and laws, which I enjoin upon you today for your good. Mark the heavens to their uttermost reaches. Mark, the heavens to their uttermost reaches belong to the Lord your God, the earth and all that is on it. Yet it was to your fathers that the Lord your God, drawn in his love for them, so that he chose you, their lineal descendants, from among all peoples, as is now the case. Cut away, therefore, the thickening about your hearts, and stiffen your necks no more. For the Lord your God is God supreme and Lord supreme, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who shows no favor and takes no bribe, but upholds the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and befriends the stranger, providing him with food and clothing. You too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You must revere the Lord your God. Only God shall you worship. To God shall you hold fast, and by God's name shall you swear. God is your glory and is your God, who wrought for you those marvelous, awesome deeds that you saw with your own eyes. Your ancestors went down to Egypt, 70 persons in all, and now the Lord your God has made you as numerous as the stars of the heaven. So, before I share with you what I would like to today, I'm just kind of curious. Does anybody have any general thoughts about these two passages that I just pointed out?
I'll just add that it shows the value of being the downtrodden and the unfortunate, and it's a way to learn empathy. That you were slaves in Egypt, and so you should have compassion for the orphan and the widow and so forth.
Okay.
And then the only other quick comment I'll make is that um, uh, the God of the Old Testament is um, a little bit of hellfire and brimstone in terms of his requirement that you love him and follow his commandments.
Okay. Um, Thank you, Bill. Any other reactions to those two paragraphs? So in that first one,
Jeff, I was just going to say, to teach us humility, that you may think you alone have worked and achieved this thing, but it is God who granted you the gifts that enabled you to succeed.
absolutely. And by the way, there's a Talmudic teaching, and I don't have the words exact, but basically you're supposed to put two pieces of paper in your pocket. The first one says, it says something like, "For me, the world was created." The second one is, "I will return to my beginnings of dust and ashes." Those aren't exact quotes, but the general gist. So you've got basically this idea of balancing, of moderation, that the world is there for you to take advantage, but at the same time, remember your roots so that whatever prosperity you earn or receive doesn't overwhelm your whole being. And by the way, some people have the mistaken thought that you should never become prosperous because that will destroy you and all that sort of thing. Just a quick comment from DvarTorah August from Clow. In times of success and prosperity, we must remember those who have assisted us in the past, as Jill was just saying. The Israelites are about to experience a great transformation. After 40 years in the wilderness, they are to enter a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains of wheat and barley, of vines, figs, and pomegranates, where they will lack nothing. On the east bank of the Jordan, Moses instructs them, "When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to God." Is this reminder necessary? Could the Israelites, eating from the bounty of the land, ever forget who enabled them to enjoy it? Moses fears that the Israelites will indeed quickly forget the lessons of the Exodus and the hardships of the wilderness. The land, which should serve as a constant reminder of God's goodness to them, may soon be regarded as the spoils of war, because don't forget, they're going to have to dispossess all the people that are in there. So this could easily be seen as the spoils of war. God does not begrudge the Israelites the fine houses, the abundant herds and harvests, the gold and the silver of their new land. The Torah portion does not denounce the Israelites' acquisition of wealth. Rather, it cautions them, as we just read, "Beware lest you forget God, and you say to yourselves, 'My own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me.' Wealth is dangerous when it leads its possessors to become self-absorbed and self-congratulatory. And even great scientists like Einstein says, I just made developments on many of the discoveries that those who have come before me have made. I just enhanced those discoveries." So I want to share with you a little story that kind of captures this whole idea. This is a little bit different. And this is I believe it's a Hasidic story. And it was written by Chana Sharfstein. And this is from a book that I remember my kids reading when they were young. And I'm looking for the name of it. And the name of the book is called The Call of the Shofar. And it was edited by Nissan Mendel. So there's a variety of different stories in here. And this one is called The Mirror. So as we start beginning to approach Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's just kind of a little bit of introspective. This is a story about a very beautiful and special mirror. It hung on a wall in the dining room of a fine house belonging to a wealthy man. The mirror was large and square, with a wide, thick gold frame, carved with beautiful designs of leaves and flowers. Everyone that saw the mirror admired it, but everyone also noticed that it was imperfect. On one of the corners, you see, the silver backing had been scraped off, so that this part of the mirror was just plain glass. People would remark upon its beauty and then say, "Oh, what a pity. Too bad the mirror is damaged." To everyone's surprise, the mirror's owner would tell his visitors that it was he himself who had deliberately scraped the silver backing off. Can you imagine owning such a costly mirror, a work of art, and then ruining it? Let me tell you the story of that mirror. Many years ago in a small town in Poland, there lived a man called Abraham. He owned a small store. He earned just enough money to take care of his family. He wasn't a rich man, but he was also not a very, very poor man. He had only a few customers. Sometimes people left without buying anything because Abraham did not have many things to choose from. They went to the big stores instead, where they could find what they wanted. But Abraham was happy with his life. Even though he wasn't rich, he always had enough to share with others. No visitor that came to his home ever left hungry. Every time a poor person needed help, Abraham always found money to give him. Abraham and his wife lived a very simple life. Their home was small. The house really needed a paint job, but there was never enough money for that. It seemed to them that it was more important to help someone in real trouble than to paint their house. Their furniture was old for the same reason. The curtains on the window had probably been washed 100 times. Abraham and his wife had no carpets on the floor. Their clothes were plain, and they didn't often buy new things. Many of their cups and plates had chips and cracks. The food they ate was simple. Yes, it wasn't a very fancy home, but it was a real home. It was warm and a happy place. Everyone felt comfortable and relaxed there. Abraham had many visitors because everyone knew that he was kind and liked to be helpful. One day, Abraham was standing in the doorway of his little store, waiting for customers. Suddenly, he noticed a stranger walking towards his store. Abraham lived in a small town, so he knew everyone there. When the stranger was near the store, Abraham asked him how he could help. "Maybe you would like to come to my home and rest a while. If you're hungry, please be my guest. If you are thirsty, please come with me for something to drink. Perhaps you need money. We'll do our best to help you." Abraham's invitation was so warm and friendly that the stranger decided to stop in his house for a rest. What Abraham did not know was that this was no ordinary stranger. This was a very holy, wise, and famous Rebbe from a town far away. He was on his way to a wedding and happened to pass through Abraham's town. The Rebbe was an important man, and many people in Poland traveled long distances to listen to his words of wisdom or to ask for a blessing or prayer in time of need. It would have been a great honor for any home to have this Rebbe as a guest. The Rebbe soon noticed Abraham's kindness and his generosity. He knew many rich people who could have helped the poor much more easily than Abraham, but who did much less than he. The Rebbe enjoyed his short stay. Before he left, he blessed Abraham with riches so that he should be able to continue helping the poor and needy more easily. After the Rebbe left, Abraham's store suddenly became a very busy place. All day long, customers were coming in. Everyone found what they wanted. No longer did people leave his store to shop somewhere else. With each day that passed, Abraham had more new customers and more money to bring home. Soon he had to make his store larger to fit all his new customers. After a while, Abraham became a very big, important, and rich storekeeper. He became one of the richest men in the town. The Rebbe's blessing that Abraham should become wealthy had been fulfilled. To be rich seems mighty good when one is poor. People sometimes think that if they were rich, life would be beautiful. But being rich can be a problem too. Now that Abraham had a big store, he had a lot more work to do. He worried about robbers breaking into his store or his home. He worried about his business. He wanted his store to keep on growing. He wanted a very beautiful home. He wanted new, fancy clothes. Because Abraham was busy with his store, he found less and less time for studying the Torah and going to shul to pray. He didn't even have time to bother with poor people. Abraham could only be seen by special appointment. His secretaries were told to give money to needy people who came for his help, but Abraham had no time to listen to their stories or their problems. Abraham and his wife built a brand new house. It almost looked like a palace. It had many rooms, and all the rooms were large and beautiful. On the windows hung soft velvet drapes. The floors were covered with thick rugs. Wallpaper on the walls. The kitchen was filled with new pots and pans. There were fine dishes in the cabinets. All the furniture was new and expensive. The dining room table was made of shiny wood. The chairs in the living room were soft and plump. On the walls hung paintings by real artists. And on one wall in the living room, there he hung a huge mirror. It was so big, it almost covered the whole wall. All around this mirror, there was a wide, thick frame of gold. No one else in town had such a fine mirror. Everyone who saw it spoke of its beauty because it truly was a masterpiece. Quite a change, is it not? Said Abraham with a pleased smile on his face. And that mirror, he continued, is my favorite treasure. Of all the lovely things I own, I like that mirror the best. It cost a great deal of money, but it was worth it. It is truly a masterpiece, a work of art, is it not? And the Rebbe who had come for a visit was there taking all this in. And Abraham turned to him and said, it truly is a masterpiece, a work of art, is it not? As he turned to the Rebbe. Yes, the Rebbe answered, quite a change, quite a change. He said this softly in a low, serious voice, and his face looked sad. Suddenly the Rebbe called to Abraham. Come here, he said, and asked him to walk over to the mirror and stand in front of it. The Rebbe backed away a little bit and said to Abraham, tell me what you see. Abraham was puzzled with this, but he answered, myself. That's what I see in this mirror, my own reflection. That's all I can see. Look closely, the Rebbe said. What else do you see? Well, I see my lovely furniture reflected in the mirror. I see my paintings. I see my rugs, my drapes. I can see many things in my beautiful home, answered Abraham. The Rebbe then walked over to the window with Abraham. He pushed aside the drapes and he told Abraham to look out into the street. It was on a big street. People were always passing by. And since it was a small town, Abraham knew almost all the people walking past. The Rebbe asked him many questions about all the people they saw. And Abraham told him, see that woman right there with the basket? She was a poor widow with many children. She was hoping that kind people would put food in the basket for her family. He told the rabbi about Bensy, the water carrier, who was getting old and found it hard to carry the water. He pointed out Yankel, the tailor, a fine Jew who went to shul every day, but was very poor and never had enough money for his family. Abraham was really puzzled and was wondering why the Rebbe was asking him all these questions. The Rebbe was a serious man who never had time to waste. Why should he be so curious about all these people? Then the Rebbe said to Abraham, it's strange, isn't it? A mirror and a window are both made of glass, but they're both very different. What do you mean? Asked Abraham. Well, said the Rebbe, when you looked in the mirror, you could only see yourself and the things that belong to you. You could see much more when you looked out the window. Then you could see all your neighbors and your friends from the whole town. Abraham paused. That's true. A mirror and a window are both made from glass. The window is transparent. Light can pass through it. It's clear you can see everything through it. The mirror, on the other hand, is covered with silver on one side. The rays of light can't pass through, and therefore a mirror can only reflect what is in front of it. I see, said the Rebbe, and nodded his head. I see. The piece of glass that is plain is clear through and through, allowing you to see others and their lives. But when it's covered with silver, then you can only see yourself. Very interesting. It's really quite fantastic, isn't it? Now, do you think it will work the other way too? Could you take a mirror and scrape off the silver so that you would be able to see everyone else instead of yourself? Abraham's eyes filled with tears. He felt so ashamed. Finally, he was beginning to understand everything that had happened to him since he became wealthy. That evening, Abraham made a big party in his home. The whole town was invited, especially all the poor people. Everyone had a fine time, and then Abraham asked for silence. He made a short speech and asked for everyone's forgiveness. He told his guests that he was sorry for the way he had acted after he became wealthy. His life would now be different. He promised them that his doors would always be open for everyone, and that he never would be too busy to help those that needed him. After all the guests had left, Abraham walked over to his beautiful mirror. With a sharp knife, he scraped off the silver covering in one corner. He didn't stop until that part was as clear as glass, and only then was he truly satisfied. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yashakoa.